NFL free agency days 3, 4, and 5. Took a little bit of a break, let some signings get up so we could have some stuff to talk about here. And really important days. Again, we're talking about players that are getting signed. They're going to really, really matter to teams next year. Now, that's obvious getting free agency, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Tell you who it is that actually matters and who doesn't. So, going team by team, first we got the Arizona Cardinals. Nothing new for them, actually, in the last couple days, which, actually not a huge deal. I really like where they are. They did trade for Rodney Hudson. I talked about in my last video. That was incredible. Atlanta Falcons. That's rough. So they signed Eric Harris. They're losing, right? So they're losing safeties. Now, they're not really losing production at safety unless they lose DeMonte KZ, who's by far the best on their roster. But regardless of if he's there or who they're losing, I really, really hope for their sake they're not depending on Eric Harris to play any number of defensive snaps, like literally even one. One of the absolute worst defensive players in the NFL the last couple of years. While theoretically he has the range, is a really fast dude to cover as a free safety, he in practice absolutely doesn't. Constantly misdirected, horrible in run defense. Nothing against the guy personally, but really bad signing. Now we are talking about almost no money, whatever, but not good. Now their other one more okay. Brandon Copeland from the Patriots, a player that the Patriots actually used in a decent way and showed that he could play in a very specific role okay. And actually that role is one that the Falcons were missing. I talked about going into the offseason they were missing an interior presence, a linebacker, and I think there's definitely a chance of Brandon Copeland. You see next year passes Michael Walker, who they have on roster, whoever else they might sign, to be that guy and play at least on third and short. And I actually really like that signing. Baltimore Ravens, nothing new. Buffalo Bills. So they get the big meme one. Not gonna spend too much time on it because I don't really care because it's a backup quarterback. But Mitchell Trubisky. Don't actually mind it that much. Obviously, he's really bad, but he does provide an interesting little bit of a coin flip in terms of being able to win a game in a really, really good offense, which he does enter here. So, whatever. Better than Matt Barkley, probably. So, actually, probably not going to roast it that much. They also signed Jacob Hollister. Jacob Hollister is one of the players going to the offseason who I think very, very highly of that I know the NFL didn't, and they're just wrong about that. Jacob Hollister is a player as a tight end who legitimately creates separation, very consistently. Used terribly in the Seahawks offense, as every other player with any level of offensive talent is. That's not Tyler Lockett, basically. And when he was on the field, he was open a ton. Russell Wilson also not super prone to throwing to the tight end outside of when he had Greg Olsen. But I love that for the Buffalo Bills. He's immediately their best tight end by quite a distance. And between him now, if he actually gets on the field as he should, and the receivers they have, you're talking about a repeat of the elite offense from last year. Carolina Panthers, another one actually. So they signed Dan Arnold at tight end, who's a fairly similar player to Jacob Hollister. He's a better athlete, but in terms of actual on-the-field production, what they offer your team, pretty similar. And I like that signing. Again, 2 years, $6 million is, it's nothing. It's not an important number, despite some people saying it's a little bit too much, whatever, I don't care. And you're talking about immediately a player who's going to come in and be the best receiving tight end on the team. Now, he does still have weaknesses as a run blocker. He legitimately fits into that horrible run blocker stereotype some of these receiving tight ends get, which I think a lot of times is misplaced. With him, it's not. But yeah, I actually really like that. You're talking about a good offensive player at a cheap price. And another one, David Moore, third receiver from the Seattle Seahawks for the last couple of years. Another really good player. He, of the Seattle receivers, I feel like pretty clearly was the least who benefited from Russell Wilson just kind of making things for him, Tyler Lockett being by far the most. David Moore was legitimately good. He can do things downfield, for himself. He knows how to react to balls. He knows how to play them in the air. He knows how to find space in defense. And at that price, you're talking about a really good player that, frankly, isn't going to be all that different from what they're losing in Curtis Samuel. Now, as far as the all-around offense goes, with lining up in the backfield, that type of thing, yeah, you're definitely losing that. But the more important part of receiver, the receiving, not actually all that different. So really good by them. They also signed Rashaan Melvin. Hasn't played in a couple of years. I don't really want to comment on that until he gets back on the field, especially at his age. The Chicago Bears. Another big one that transpired since I made a video. Andy Dalton, new starting quarterback. And I will tell you, if this was the roster that they had the last couple of years, I wouldn't hate this. I wouldn't far from love it. But Andy Dalton, I can tell you pretty confidently, as he's shown through his whole career, including last year, really, if you look at actually what happened with that team, that given a competent roster, he can perform competently. Not a huge compliment, but there's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL who can, namely Mr. Trubisky just on the team last year. And while I don't, I don't think he gets their ceiling, frankly, even really much higher than does Nick Foles, their quarterback, on roster from last year. He does help them at a consistent offensive basis. And frankly, if they keep the right players offensively going into next year, they could be okay. Now, I don't necessarily expect that. They're kind of dumb franchise, but we'll see. I'm not going to roast that signing too much at 1 year, $10 million. There is all the other stuff about they should have got a better quarterback, true, but they weren't getting Russell Wilson. They weren't getting Deshaun Watson even before whatever is happening there. So with the options available, I mean, you could do worse. You could have re-signed Mr. Trubisky. And they made a great signing. Angelo Blackson, 2 years, $5.5 million. Been really good each of the last 2 years, both the stops on the Texans and on the Arizona Cardinals. Really, really good player. Now he's a little bit older, and I think maybe Bears fans are going to be a little disappointed, but they really shouldn't be. I'm telling you, he's the difference between him and who you're losing, Roy Robinson Harris, isn't that big. Robinson Harris is better for sure, but you're still talking about an interior guy who can disrupt plays and be a useful player. So I like that a lot. Signed Desmond Trufant to be a starter. Well, we'll talk about the corner position as a whole. They did one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. Their release of Kyle Fuller is beyond ridiculous. His cap number was not that bad. We're talking about one of the 6 or 7 corners in the NFL who even matters to a point. So them releasing him is just garbage. Literally one of the worst decisions I've ever seen. Getting past that, though, signing Desmond Trufant, not that bad. He was roasted too much for his role and how bad the Detroit defense was last year. A, he was injured a lot of it. B, when he's on the field, a ton of their problems just came from their entirety of their stupid scheme and their literal lack of zero pass rush outside of Romeo Okwara. So I don't blame him too much. I actually thought he was okay. I think he'll be okay on the Bears scheme as they tend to do with outside corners, although he will be a clear downgrade from Fuller. Cincinnati Bengals, another team that made really good moves since I've been away. Riley Reeves, starting left tackle, has been on the Vikings for the last couple of years, and though the Vikings have had offensive line problems, again, wasn't Riley Reeves' fault. You're going to be talking about a player who immediately steps in, becomes the best offensive lineman on the Bengals by a wide margin, and is going to be, at the very worst, average. And that's really valuable in the NFL. I love that contract. I love that signing for them. Perfect. Larry Ogunjobi, too. 1 year, $6.2 million. Really, really good. Larry Ogunjobi's not an elite player, but when you add him to a defensive line that, low-key, when healthy, has a chance to be really good. I mean, people forget how good DJ Reader is, who got injured in week 3, week 4, missed the entire rest of the year last year. I mean, DJ Reader's an elite player. And when you add Larry Ogunjobi to that, and some other guys that they have already on roster, I mean, granted, they're losing Carl Lawson, which does hurt them, and we'll see what they do to replace him, because that has me worried to a point. But there's a chance that defensive front is going to look real, real good last year. And I'm definitely forgetting someone who I think is really good on their team. But, whatever. Point is, good signing, good contract. Cleveland Browns, another team that did really well. Troy Hill, a corner who legitimately matters. Now, he's not one of those 6 or 7 guys I mentioned earlier, but especially as a slot guy, we're talking about a really good player. 2 years, $9 million, that's fine, whatever. You'll take that. And for a team whose maybe greatest weakness last year was slot corner, especially once they had injuries, to go from a weakness to one of the better ones in the NFL, I mean, that's really, really good. They also signed Anthony Walker, where, again, Brown's second biggest weakness, or maybe tied for the biggest, was their horrible linebackers outside of Malcolm Smith. Now you're adding Anthony Walker from the Colts, who is a legitimate difference maker as a run defender, and frankly, even in pass coverage, he's mediocre. He's not awful, so really good from them. Combined with other moves, I mean, you get Malik Jackson on a 1-year deal, still has it at this age to a point, not, a killer like he was when he first went to Jacksonville, but still a player who can legitimately create pressure. I mean, you're talking about a really, really good offseason for them so far. Dallas Cowboys, another team I'm going to give credit to. Now, they have one bad one in here, but Terrell Basham, from the New York Jets, isn't it? Terrell Basham, so he's had injury issues, and I think he had a suspension or something like that at one point. But when he's played, even last year on the Jets, he's good. He's a defensive end who can actually rush the passer with some level of frequency, even compared to a lot of guys that people think are better than him. He's just isn't the case. He's actually a reasonable pass rusher, and even as a run defender, he's not awful. And at 2 years, $6.5 million to get someone who's going to produce as a pass rusher, that's really good. The Keanu Neal one, that's horrible. 1 year, $5 million for a player who can't play safety is really bad. If you're expecting him to be a safety, which it seems like the Cowboys probably are, especially if you're going to combine him in the same defensive backfield as Donovan Wilson. At safety, you're just asking for horrible problems. Now, they still have time to fix it, find someone who can actually cover back there, but that's not good. 1 year, $5 million for a bad player is not good. Granted, he can play dime linebacker okay. If they use him like that, I'll roast him a lot less. I don't necessarily have faith in the Cowboys' defensive mental fortitude. But whatever. Carlos Watkins from the Texans, that's a good signing. 1 year, $1.75 million. Not great, not even really all that good, but at least reasonable. And actually, compared to what the Cowboys had on the interior last year, as I'm assuming he'll slide to 3 technique. That's not bad. Brent Urban killed it for the Bears last year. One of the guys who made their defensive front go, especially when Nakeem Hicks was out. And that's a player who actually matters. And listen, the Cowboys are putting together a front four here that could be really good, like legitimately really good next year. So, we'll see how it goes. They do still miss the high end, although Alden Smith is pretty close. But yeah, they're doing some stuff right here in the offseason. The Denver Broncos. I really disliked the Ronald Darby signing, still do, but they get Kyle Fuller from the Bears for 1 year, $9.5 million. That's nuts. I mean, like I said, they get one of the elite corners in the NFL for a 1 year deal at not a huge price because the Bears' stupidity. Like, that's a super win. Huge for them. Love that. Detroit Lions. Let's see. Okay, so they have a chance to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL next year. Their individual pieces, if they were on certain, spread them around to different teams, I actually think they'd be okay. Their offensive line has a chance to be pretty good. Jared Goff, a really good system can function okay. We've seen that before. And the receivers on certain teams are okay, but when you put them together, this is really bad. I mean, you're talking about Jared Goff, right? A player who has real trouble processing defenses and especially processing defenses down the field. And they're signing him receivers who really either only or mostly function down the field. That's not good. Tyrell Williams, I already roasted that one. Rashad Perriman, I actually like as a player. Like I said, I think there's a lot of teams he'd be really useful on. And frankly, he'll probably still be useful on the Lions. But it looks like they're building an offense for if they still have Matt Stafford, which is not the case. And Jared Goff needs guys who are going to get open short. And unless they give Danny Amendola 150 catches next year, they're going to have some real issues with that in Detroit. So I don't love that. Don't love the direction that points in, but you never know. They also signed Charles Harris from the Falcons. I like that a little bit. Actually, I thought Charles Harris, as a former first-round pick, did show some things, especially as a hands rusher, that he could be in a bottom-end rotational role pretty decent. So I'm fine with that. They signed Tim Boyle from the Packers, longtime backup. Don't care if that guy starts. Probably not in a good spot, although I haven't watched near enough of him to make a final declaration on that. Houston Texans. So they're a team, because they've made so many signings, naturally they're going to make some good ones, and they've made some bad ones. Ones they've made in the last couple of days, mix of both. Nothing too bad or too good, but they sign Jordan Jenkins, 2 years, $6 million. I like that a lot. Jordan Jenkins is a useful edge player, not really a pass rusher, but compared to what the Texans have, he actually, frankly, is a similar player to guys like Brendan Scarlett or Dylan Cole, just a lot better. So, that's good. Philip Lindsay, 1 year, $3.25 million. Not one of the running backs who matters in the NFL, so I don't really care. But, he's fine. He's serviceable. He's not going to kill you as a running back, although, nobody will. But, whatever, I don't really care. Desmond King, 1 year, $3 million. That's really good. Desmond King deserves more than that. I guess teams don't think he's that good, and that they're just wrong. He's not great or anything, but as far as slot corners go, the Browns signed like 3 slot corners just this offseason or worse than him. So, take that for what we will. I like that signing for sure, especially for a team rebuilding at this point. Kimu Grigiel, that one's bad. Hopefully he's just a special team for them, I would assume so. We saw even in the really good, well-coached Dolphins defense last year that he couldn't get on the field, and when he was generally the worst player there. Whatever. If he's just a special teamer, actually, I'm okay with that. He seems to be really good with that. I know he's been voted captain multiple times, but, we'll see. Let's see. Looks like that's all. And Cole Toner from the LA Chargers hasn't played enough snaps for me to make a real declaration on him. Colts. So they have one signing, Isaac Rochelle, defensive end from the Chargers. And actually, I don't love Isaac Rochelle. Again, he's, whenever you're talking about a defensive end who's not a pass rusher, you better be real good at other stuff. Isaac Rochelle's not quite that level, but I will say they're losing Denico Autry this offseason, who is one of the elite run guys in the NFL as far as defensive end goes. And Isaac Rochelle can at least replace some of that. Now, he's not nearly as good, and Denico Autry also can rush the passer a little bit. Isaac Rochelle can't really, but, I'm not going to roast it too much because I actually think he's going to be decent in that defense. Jacksonville Jaguars, main one, Marvin Jones. He's not great. He's fine. He's whatever. He's going to be whatever, third, fourth best receiver on the team. Now, that's not necessarily a disaster. I mean, you're going to be okay if he's at that level of receiver in your team. You're actually probably going to be pretty good. I'm not going to roast him too much. Don't expect, elite numbers or production or usefulness out of him, and you're going to be okay because he is a guy who doesn't separate that well. He does it okay. And actually, funny enough, he generally, the better the corner gets, he's one of a few receivers in the NFL where he'll get better with them, but I'm not going to roast that signing too much, especially for what it seems like Trevor Lawrence's play style might be. He could be okay. They signed Jihad Ward from the Ravens. Whatever. He's not a player that really mattered. Generally, if a player gets thrown into that edge role on the Ravens, you expect them, if they're any level of good, to kind of blow up because of how the Ravens do things there. He didn't. He was just okay, and generally that's not a great sign if he goes to another team. Now, he played more down from like actual stand-up edge for them, so I'm a little less concerned, but he wasn't exactly impressive there either, so, whatever. I'm not super into that signing, but not a big deal. And he's not a bad player, so that's fine. Kansas City Chiefs re-signed Mike Rimmers. I like that. Now, he looked real bad in a impossible situation in the Super Bowl. I said that going into that game. That's not a surprise. And if they use him right, if he's not the best lineman on your team by far, then he's going to look a lot better. And I actually like them re-signing him. They also signed Blake Bell. Love that one. Blake Bell is a tight end who's been underutilized his whole career. As a receiver, he's actually good. People think of him as a blocker because he's a former quarterback. They think of him as like a special teams guy or whatever, which he is that too. But as a receiver, he actually does kind of remind me a lot of Jacob Hollister, I talked about earlier, where he can do some things. And I wouldn't be surprised with the Chiefs. Shit, he's already on the Chiefs and used okay if Blake Bell, gets back into their rotation. Los Angeles Chargers, two pretty good ones. Jared Cook is definitely not the player Hunter Henry is, but as far as production goes, I think you're going to end up in a fairly similar place. And Jared Cook actually is a down the field receiver, given how Justin Herbert plays, is not bad. I actually like that quite a bit for them. And Oday Abushi is a replacement level, just above replacement level guard. But given what the Chargers dealt with last year, the more non-horrible players they can sign in the interior is going to be beneficial for them. And Oday Abushi does fit that category. Las Vegas Raiders. So Kenyon Drake, 2 years, $11 million. That's not good. Kenyon Drake, not a horrible player. In fact, in some schemes, if you went back to Kyle Shanahan, if you went to Sean McVay, which granted, again, any running back couldn't do that, but he can be really good in those. The way the Raiders run the ball, though, I wouldn't be really excited about him. Now, he is a good compliment to Josh Jacobs for as much as that really matters. I will say that, but that's too much money for a backup running back who doesn't matter. They also, re-signed Theo Riddick. I don't care. And the one I'm worried about, Nick Martin. Nick Martin was horrible for the Texans, has been his whole career, basically. Now, he's not quite like Mason Cole, Garrett Bradbury levels of horrible, but not good. And I'm worried with them trading Rodney Hudson that they think he's going to come in and be their starter. Newsflash, they're going to get a whole lot worse real quickly if that's the case. I'm not going to guarantee it. He can beat out in camp or whatever, but that one does worry me. Miami Dolphins, A+ on the Will Fuller thing. I get his injury history. You can say $10 million is too much for somebody with that. I'm not going to hate you for it, but you're talking about a really good, like legitimately really good receiver, not just a deep threat. People think that because the way Deshaun Watson plays and because of the highlights that Will Fuller naturally produces as a result of that. But Will Fuller actually as an all-around receiver is really good. And while, he's not quite, he's not Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs or whatever, he's not all that far off. And if he stays healthy, you're talking about a really good player that's going to help Tua a lot. And frankly, when Tua first came in, he did show that he was going to be willing to throw downfield at least a little bit into matchups he liked outside the numbers. And Will Fuller is probably going to fit that stereotype. So we'll see, if Tua got broken by the end of the year last year, if he's just not that good overall, if he even plays. But if he does, I think Will Fuller could help him quite a bit, actually. So I like that. He also signed Matt Skura from the Ravens. Now, this contract is nothing, so I'm not going to roast him too much, but he was really not good in a scheme that makes alignment look good, so that worries me. But he wasn't horrible either. Malcolm Brown, running back from the Rams, actually a good player. Not a running back who matters, though, so not going to spend time on it. Brendan Scarlett from the Texans. Scarlett's not really a good player, but he's not horrible, and actually I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins fit a player like him into a useful role. They seem to have been doing that with a lot of these guys, like Adrian Ginkle, Hal Van Noy, both of them better than Scarlett, but wouldn't surprise me if he actually becomes a reasonable player. Duke Riley, on the other hand, horrible. Now, this contract is basically better minimum, but really reminds me of the Camus Grugier-Hill signing last year, where you're talking about a bad Eagles linebacker who should be a special teams player, who you're going to sign, try out on defense, is never going to see a snap again. Except for Duke Riley, doesn't play special teams as well. So, whatever. But it's almost no money. Not going to roast it too much. Minnesota Vikings, nothing new. New England Patriots. Re-signed David Andrews. Excellent. David Andrews really important to them. Really good player. Got not quite as good as I was expecting when he was without Joe Thuney and some of the good players he was around last year. I thought he was going to do better even by himself. Not that he was bad or anything, but still one of the better centers in the NFL for sure. So I like that. Let's say re-signed Hal Van Noy from the Dolphins. That's fine. He's a player. I mean, they obviously know how to use him. He's going to be productive for them, and I like him. But is he really a difference maker? Not necessarily. But again, not going to roast him too much. Let's see. They also signed Raekwon McMillan. They already have him and Juwan Bentley on roster, so I'm not totally sure why they would do this. Raekwon McMillan didn't even see snaps for the Raiders, despite them having borderline league worst running linebackers last year, so that's not a good sign. But again, he's another player. If the Patriots have injuries, could he be productive as their run-stopping middle linebacker that they still play a lot? Yeah, I think he'd probably be okay. So I like that. New Orleans Saints, nothing new. New York Giants. So probably the biggest news since the last time. So we'll build up to it real quick. Mike Lennon, I like that as a backup quarterback. He's not horrible. Your team is at least capable of winning games. He's a little bit of an upgrade to Colt McCoy. Whatever. Reggie Ragland, that's bad. Really bad player. Just can't cover or move side to side at all, which in the modern NFL gets you killed. Now, in a certain role, in a certain functionality, he can be okay. I don't trust the Giants to do that, although this is a tiny contract, so whatever. Kyle Rudolph, 2 years, $12 million. Probably too much for a backup tight end. He's not somebody who actually offers all that much as a receiver outside of the red zone, although he is notable, maybe better than borderline any other tight end in the NFL that's not, Travis Kelce, Greg Kittle, or George Kittle. But does he truly help your offense like on an efficiency level? No. But then the big one. Kenny Golladay, 4 years, $72 million. That is one whole big garbage can of a contract there. I have a lot of problems with Kenny Golladay as an elite receiver. Basically, boiled down to one big one. He's really not an elite receiver. He's really not even that close. He's really similar to Chris Godwin, but he's not quite as good as an after the catch player, which is what makes Chris Godwin even close to elite. And even as a separator, as an actual route runner, he's even worse. So, I mean, listen, Kenny Golladay, he's not horrible. That type of receiver is going to be baseline useful in a lot of ways, no matter where he plays. The problem is, down to down, he doesn't actually help your offense very much. Really similar to like a Cortland Sutton on the Broncos, too. And for that much money, I mean, that's not good. He's already, Darius Slayton just straight up better on his own team already. Sterling Shepard probably more useful. I mean, this is not a good contract. Really bad. Although, listen, there will be highlights from Daniel Jones to him next year. Kenny Golladay is still an above-average receiver for sure. This much money, though, just really, really bad. And listen, Kenny Galladay's already 28 and has an extensive injury history. Not good. New York Jets. There's a good receiver contract. Keelan Cole, 1 year, $5.5 million. Players, frankly, are just as good as Kenny Golladay, or pretty close. And he's going to be pretty good on the Jets next year. Now, we'll see how much they use him in the offense. They're not exactly the brightest offensive minds, and he does still have issues as far as a consistent standpoint is concerned, but he's a good receiver, like legitimately good receiver, and if they use him right, there's a chance that he puts it together. Basically, is in a better situation than he's been in some years of his career, whether it's this year or coming up or later, that ends up with him being really productive. They signed Dan Feeney. Oh boy, was Dan Feeney really, really bad last year and the year before. I would have no hope for him if I'm a Jets fan to be anything. Now they paid him $3.5 million, which suggests to me they might try him as their starting center, maybe. That would be a disaster. I can already tell you, especially if they have better players on roster. Even I'd rather have Kevin Clark try to fill that role, but yeah, I just basically have nothing good to say about that. Lamarcus Joyner, that one I'm okay with. Now, he fills a similar boat where he was one of the worst defensive players in the NFL last year and the year before. But that was because the Raiders did consistently use him as a slot corner where he literally was, it was impossible for a defense to function with him as a slot corner. He was so bad. But as a free safety, he still did show flashes of being a lot better in that scenario. As a run support player from that position, he can actually do okay. I don't necessarily hate this signing if they play him full time there, which according to some reporting seems to be what they're expected to do. We'll see. That's what I'm going to wait and see on because I think there's a chance he's still okay. But if he's their safety, that's bad. And Tyler Kroft, that's a good signing. Reasonable tight end. Obviously a backup type, but already better than Chris Herndon, that type of thing. So I do like that signing. Philadelphia Eagles. So they have one of the biggest steals of this whole thing. Anthony Harris, 1 year, $5 million. Elite safety. Not quite killer. He's not quite in the range. Harrison Smith, Kevin Byard. Some of those guys, but he's just under that. It's still really, really good. And for 1 year, $5 million, that ain't shit. I mean, that's a good signing for them, especially for how bad they were back there last year. So, love that. Pittsburgh Steelers re-signed Juju. 1 year, $8 million. $8 million is too much for the fourth best receiver on your team, which he comfortably is. I mean, maybe he's pretty close to James Washington for third, but that's way too much. Just way too much. Again, that's another one. I don't barely have anything good to say about it. Chris Wormley, though, 2 years, 4.5 re-signed. That's fine. He's actually a reasonable interior player. Don't have too much to comment on that. They signed Joe Haeg for some reason. Terrible guard, at least. Single-handedly lost the Buccaneers a game last year when he played. Got benched, never saw the field again. Don't expect him to play, of course, but I can't really fathom why they would even bother signing a player like that. Seattle Seahawks re-signed Chris Carson. Too much money for a running back, it doesn't matter, although it's not quite to the range where I'm going to kill them for it. Chris Carson, not one of the top, 4 or 5 guys that actually matter, so don't care that much, so it's just too much money, but whatever. Seahawks and a Seahawk. Reliably. 49ers, let's see, nothing new there. Buccaneers, re-signed Raheem Nunez-Roches, 2 year, $5 million. Cool with that. Not a great player, not a horrible player, and he fits in their defense pretty well. Tennessee Titans re-signed Tyson Braylo, 1 year, $1.9 million. That's fine. He actually functioned pretty reasonably when he was there. Still a fairly bad pass protector, but he showed that it actually in their offense, depending, if they keep the Arthur Smith stuff going even after he left, he could be okay. I don't mind that contract. They also signed Kevin Johnson and Janoris Jenkins. 2 corners who were good last year. Kevin Johnson was pretty good for the Browns. And Janoris Jenkins definitely far from a disaster. They do remind me of what the Titans had at corner the last couple of years. Not that that's a bad thing, though. They lose Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson. They get those two. Frankly, not much of a difference. And that's a positive thing. So good for them on that. Washington football team, the last team here. Looks like the only thing is they... signed Tyler Larson from the Panthers. Barely played snaps. Not going to pretend like I have strong thoughts about him. And then David Mayo is a bad player, but hopefully a special teamer or a flyer at that point. So yeah, overall last couple days, I mean, main bad one that sticks out is the Kenny Golladay thing. Other than that, though, you're talking about a lot of really important players who are going to be key to these teams when they're going through injuries to stay good next year. And we'll see how it pans out, but that's a pretty good idea of what matters and what doesn't.